down, yelling out money, anything. Ayy, ooh, got the foot on the gas, pedal to the metal when I'm getting to the bag. Ayy, got the foot on the gas, pedal to the metal when the lane moving fast. Ayy, ayy, let them all cross. If they hate, then let them hate and make a bigger boss. Ayy.
What is up, ladies and gentlemen? We are back. We are live. It is the Freight Coach Podcast, the top podcast in transportation, coming to you guys every single weekday, 8:30 in Pacific, 10:30 Central, to break down some industry headlines. But most importantly, you guys provide some actual insight into what you can do with all of this information. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. This is the real side of freight, ladies and gentlemen. And I say that before every single show. And what I mean by that is I only speak with transportation professionals, because at the end of the day, you guys, I want to talk to the right individuals who have done what you're looking to do or who are currently doing what you're trying to achieve, so you can take that information, apply it, utilize it, and see a meaningful difference in your business and your life. Happy Wednesday, everybody. It is the best day of the week because the Freight Coach newsletter drops every single Wednesday. And just like with everything, I don't auto-sign anybody up for it. So if you want to receive it, again, you guys, it's all transportation-related insight in there. I'm not trying to be a life coach or anything like that. Go to thefreightcoach.com. It will auto-prompt you to register. As always, I don't sign people up without their will, because I personally hate when I get new newsletters in and I'm like, who are these people and how did you get my email address? But with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk about FreightTech today. We're going to talk about the job market on that side of the industry. And there is nobody who's more qualified to talk about this than my good friend, Wasim Munayyer of is it the Munayyer Group, right? That's what
yes.
There it is, dude. I botched the name for a second because I was like, wait, I was trying to read your hat. Your hat distracted me there. Dude, what's going on, man? How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Thank God. Everything's good. Family's healthy. Work is busy. No complaints here. How are you?
Dude, I'm just saying, man, I'm out here literally just doing what I love to do the most, like it's just everything freight. It's, doing this podcast every single day and then jumping out there and building my brokerage as well is phenomenal. I'm saying, man, I have no complaints.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be with you.
No, dude, absolutely. It's the first. I'm actually shocked that this is the first time you've been on the show. We've only, been in contact with each other for, I don't know, about 5 years now. Yeah. But, so dude, before we go any further though, like how'd you get your start into recruiting and kind of what led you to start your company?
Sure. Yeah. So I'll try not to bore you with too many details, but the high level, I've been recruiting for 15 years. So it's really all I've ever done since I graduated from school. I got into the business long before I knew anything about logistics. And, when I started out in recruiting in New Jersey and New York, I worked for some of the larger firms in New York, and we were specifically recruiting for tech. So before I knew anything about logistics at all, I did that for a few years. Then I got recruited to run internal talent acquisition, actually, at a couple very large logistics service providers, including Houston Logistics and Ports America. And so between Houston and Ports America, I hired about 200 people a year per year over the course of 3 years. And so between those two firms, I learned the nitty gritty of logistics, man. I recruited everybody from material handlers in warehouses to dock workers to C-level people and everyone in between. And so that covered your freight forwarding, your domestic transportation, your intermodal, drayage, rail, every kind of mode of transportation you could think of. And then when I was at Ports America, they were the largest terminal operator and stevedore in the country. So I learned, a lot about what happens on the ports and on the terminals and how containers come on and off of ships and all the automation in that world. And so fast forward to February 2017, I saw an opportunity to do my own thing. And I think I always knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. Not that it's beneath me to work for anybody by any means. I'm just not a great employee, to be honest with you. And I knew I always wanted to do my own thing. And so, as an internal recruiter, I dealt with enough scenarios where I realized there was nobody out there in the market at that time. I'm sure there's more than myself now, but at that time, there was really nobody who was focused on, where supply chain and tech kind of cross paths. Mm-hmm. So I had learned the ropes on the logistics side, and prior to that had been on the tech side. And I realized that if you were trying to find folks who understood the nuts and bolts of logistics, but were very tech forward in how they approached their career in the industry, that's a pretty shallow talent pool. It still is. It certainly was even more shallow in 2017. And I just decided to take the leap, So just started my own shop, and it was, like anything else, it was pretty challenging at first, but hustled hard and stayed committed. And I can't believe it, I'm saying this, but we're over 8 years now in business. So
that's a huge accomplishment, man, right there. Like that's a huge feat. And, albeit 5 years next month. And dude, it goes by so quick. And, I really relate to what you were saying there, like about not being above working for anybody else, but being a bad employee. And, I'd love to get your take on this. It wasn't that like the work, like I love to work. I might be one of the few people out there who will say that, right? Like I truly love to work.
Yeah.
I always thought I could do it better than everybody else. And that's what I love the most about entrepreneurship is it is the ultimate sport at the end of the day, in my opinion. And because it is, it's like, I mean, if I am truly able to do it better than everybody else, like I thought it was, like, this is the avenue that I get to kind of approach with it. Was that kind of your take on it? Or were you more like, I just want to go out and give it a shot. And then, at least I can always say like I tried.
Sure. Yeah. So I think my why for what I do and why I do it for myself has definitely evolved over 8 to 10 years. Right. I mean, I started my first business when I was in high school. And from that point to when I started the Munayyer Group, I think my why was I want to make as much money as possible. I'm a money hungry capitalist. I never want to not buy something because of how much it costs. And that was definitely my why. And that has definitely evolved over the years to my new why being honestly freedom, man. It's really about freedom of time and being able to spend time with your family when you want to, and being able to go play golf when you want to and do what you want. I think, you get to a certain point where, and I say this with all the humility in the world, you make a certain amount of money, you buy what you want at dinner, and you drive a nice car. And after that, money's not going to make you any happier, And so I realized as I've grown and become more mature that time is the most valuable thing that we have, man.
Yeah.
And so when you run your own shop, you kind of do what you want with your time. Obviously, I'm working my tail off. I'm still working sometimes 50, 60 hours a week. But if I want to close shop early on a Friday, I do it. If I want to go on vacation with my wife, I do it. And I think, spend time with your parents as they get older. I mean, these things are so much more valuable than anything else.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, man. And, that's kind of like where my mindset is. Like, I don't have a monetary goal that I'm chasing, right? Like I need to be worth $10 billion or anything like that. I'm chasing what you just said there, man. I'm chasing freedom, and freedom to buy what I want when I want and do what I want when I want to do it without having to ask for somebody's permission. And, like for me, I just have this vision in my head of going in and buying vehicles or buying a home and like just dropping a duffel bag of cash and saying, that's what I'm buying, and I'm paying what's in this bag right here. I'm walking out the door. I don't know. That's just like what I want to do really bad.
Yeah. No, I hear you. Yeah. So like I said, the why for me has definitely evolved. Obviously we're still in business to make money and that's important. But the freedom of being able to kind of do what you want with your time is paramount, I think, to everything else.
Dude, 100%, man. I agree with that wholeheartedly. And, I feel like we're at a really interesting kind of time with, out in business, right? Especially within transportation, because we are coming, from a broker's perspective here, we are coming off of it's a challenging business development market at the end of the day right now, right? Like there are people out there who are onboarding. It takes a lot longer. You have to really know your shit right now to kind of stand out in a crowd. It's definitely different than when I started out there selling and stuff like that. But I also look at it as we're a couple of key things from happening to where I don't want to call it the freight floodgates are going to open up, but I feel like a lot more manufacturer shippers, all of that are going to be more open to different providers. And I feel like tech is kind of the same way, man, and what you're kind of seeing out there. And I'd love to get your opinion because like, I feel like there was obviously there was a flood of new technology that came into this industry from 2018 to probably about 2023. And then a lot of things kind of started falling off. And now like the legacy providers are there. There's some newer technology companies that are there that have kind of established themselves. Do you see a lot of, a lot of tech hesitancy out there because there was a lot promised early on with the first wave that didn't deliver? And now people are like, nah, man, I'm not going to change anything right now. Or are you seeing things kind of running business as normal from that perspective?
So definitely things are ramping up this year in terms of hiring. So the way that if you look at it kind of backwards, right, tech companies hiring is a reflection of their growth, and their growth is a reflection of the logistics service providers who are buying that technology feeling more bullish about the market and doing well, and therefore being willing to spend money on technology and innovate. I do think that the industry not necessarily became more hesitant about technology adoption after the first floodgates opened, like you said, in 2018, 2019, 2020. But I do think they learned to ask the right questions.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I as an example of this, when I was at Manifest in Vegas in February, and just kind of like walking around the floor and getting to know who the new players are and who's doing new and interesting things, who's the best at what they're doing or the first at what they're doing. And you would ask some basic questions to some of the folks at these booths around what's your value proposition, how do you separate yourself, what's your differentiator, and some of them had great answers, and some of them couldn't answer some of those basic questions. Mm-hmm. And so I think the buyers, the adopters of the technology, have definitely become more intelligent and more intuitive about what questions do I ask, how do I know if this is the right fit for me. Where is the friction going to be? Is the friction going to be in the buying process and the discovery process, or in the implementation process, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of this technology looks great, but the implementation could be disruptive. And so a lot of the prospective buyers have become, like I said, more intuitive and more intelligent about asking the right questions to figure out, is this a fit for me? Overall, I would argue that today there's more demand, there's more interest in finding efficiencies in the business, being able to automate workflows within the business. And so I would say the demand is definitely there, definitely more so today than even 4 months ago, certainly last year.
Mm-hmm. How are you working with, job seekers out there who might be coming to you and they're like, hey man, I've been on the traditional transportation side of things. Maybe they're on the trucking company, brokerage. They want to make that leap over to the tech side, but they're like, hey, I see a lot of these companies kind of going under, right? Or they're just kind of slowly fading into obscurity. How do I know that this next thing that I want to jump into is going to be around in 5 years? They got a family to support, they got everything that you've heard hundreds and hundreds of times before.
Right. And that's a great question. So certainly the conversation is different with folks who have been on the tech side. Maybe they've already worked for a tech company. They've already been through the startup life cycle, versus somebody like you're saying who has grown up in freight and transportation, but they're super excited and interested in exploring the tech side of the industry. And so for those folks, and really anybody, honestly, there's going to be, especially if we're talking about a startup, there's inherent risk in any startup, right? Whether you're an investor, whether you're an employee or a founder, there's going to be some risk to some degree. And I coach my candidates to interview interviewers, right? Ask the right questions. You can ask them to open the books. You can talk about financials. You can talk about who the founders are, who's on the board, who are the advisors, what are their track records. So interviewing for a job, particularly when you're going to tech for the first time, particularly if you're going to a startup where there might be some risk, a lot of it is, that interview should be just as much about the business, current state, desired state, who the founders and who the advisors are, as much as it is about like what's the day-to-day functions of this job. So we certainly coach our candidates to, don't take my word for it. Let's interview the interviewer and dive really deep into this and find out, not only is this something that you're excited about, but is this something that's going to make you feel secure or secure enough to take the leap over the next 2, 3, 4 years.
How would you go about, like, you see, obviously I'm a bootstrap guy out there in this world, but you see a lot of, venture-backed companies that are out there. Do you err on the side of caution if it's a first-time founder that's venture-backed, as opposed to the founder who's bootstrapped their tech company up and built it. Cause I see, you know, and again, this is just my opinion on this. I see a lot of, I don't want to call it recklessness, but you see a lot, like there's a big difference between somebody who's had to work for $1 and how they're going to spend it, as opposed to somebody who was given $1 and how they're going to spend it. Do you see a lot of apprehension from the candidate side to be like, hey man, that's like, they just kind of were given money to, you know, they had a seed round and everything. And again, there's nothing wrong with this. I want to be abundantly clear to anybody who's listening to that. But do you ever see candidate hesitancy about jumping onto a ship where an individual was, maybe they just raised money and they didn't really have a proven track record?
Sure. Yeah. So a couple of points there. I think the short answer is, I think candidates care less about where the money came from, and they care more about who's the leadership, what is the product, are you the first at what you're doing, are you the best at what you're doing, is there a value proposition, is there proper differentiators? And if all of those things are there, I'm going to feel more confident as a candidate to join your team. Some people are partial depending on their experience. You know, some people have had good and bad experiences with private equity held, you know, backed companies, or good or bad experiences with venture capital or bootstrapped, or any of those categories. I think that's less important to candidates. More important are the other factors that we discussed. Our portfolio of clients includes all of those. You know, we have companies that have done everything from scratch and took them a little bit longer to get going, and we have plenty of companies that are venture backed and private equity backed, and that's fine across the board. I also, when I'm deciding if we want to work with a client and help a team grow, I'm also looking for the same things. Yeah. I almost care less where the funding comes from and more, like I said, what's your value proposition, differentiators, how are you being impactful? Are you the first or the best at what you're doing? Because I'm going to have to answer those questions for the candidates when I'm talking to them, you know, and it's also going to depend. It's also going to be an indicator of the longevity of the company and how long you're going to be a customer. So I think those are the important factors that I look for and that candidates look for. You know, the other thing that I would say that I would encourage people to take into consideration is these venture capital firms are not cutting $5, $10, $15 million checks with their eyes closed, right? They have teams and teams of analysts that are doing due diligence and homework. And it's not like, you know, someone pitches you a demo and then someone cuts you a check. There's months and months and months of due diligence and education that goes both ways. And also there are VCs that want to write checks to companies that say, we're not interested in working with you. Right. So the founders are also doing their due diligence around, is this a good partner? How involved are they going to want to be? Are they going to want to have a pulse day in and day out on what's going on in the business? Or are they going to be letting us run the business in a more autonomous fashion? So, you know, these things don't just happen. Right. So I would encourage folks to, in most cases, believe that if someone's writing a big check, they've done a lot of homework to believe that it's a pretty good idea.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. From the companies that hire you to find them candidates, what is the biggest concern or the biggest want from that standpoint right now? Is it business development? Is it tangible industry experience? Because they're like, hey, we might not have all the freight experience in the world, but we know that this is a good product for the industry. We need people from the industry to kind of help hone our pitch and everything else to kind of bring it down to that desk level application.
Yeah, it's a great question. So right now we're seeing, honestly, this year has been, we're just busy, man. We've seen demand across the board. A lot of the jobs that went away 18 to 24 months ago, first was marketing, customer success type roles, product type roles. Those are coming back in a big way, which is great. I would argue that some of those should be the last that have gone away to begin with, but those are coming back. So we're seeing a lot of business development, a lot of product, customer success, partnerships, and a lot of engineering. About half the roles that we fill are on the engineering side, the folks that are actually building the products. The further you get away from the engineering, the more the industry knowledge seems to be in demand, right? Mm-hmm. So in most cases, we have some clients that this is not true for, but in most cases, on the engineering side, it is more important to them to hire the best top-notch engineers. Whether or not they know a thing about freight doesn't matter as much. Mm-hmm. If we're talking about customer-facing roles, customer success, product, business analysts, implementation, training, integration folks, certainly sales, there is a much more demand that somebody has the industry knowledge. as specific as possible, right? We have clients that are not only selling FreightTech, they're selling tech specifically to carriers or specifically to brokers or specifically to shippers, and even more niche within each of those categories. And in some cases, we only want to hire a salesperson who grew up on the carrier side of the business and was dealing with brokers, or grew up on the carrier side of the business and they understand the nuances and the pain points of, getting paid in AR and AP. I mean, it could get really, really specific where they want us to go find somebody who has that specific knowledge, because as a salesperson, you can empathize with the customer that you're selling to because you've been in that person's seat, right? So hopefully that kind of paints a picture for you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I feel like, I kind of see this out there as well is, a lot of the tech that is in the industry and a lot of the tech that is kind of coming through is I'm, again, I'm biased, but like, I feel like they all kind of came from the industry, right? It was like they were a trucking company owner or a broker and they saw a need and they developed a tool behind it. And they've kind of built that out because of that application that you're talking about, right? Like when you can relate to somebody who's been in that seat before, it's a huge value add and it's a huge opportunity for you to go out there. Not saying that other people can't come in from outside of the industry, see a problem, build a solution around it to fix it. But I've just personally seen that when you can granularly decipher what your target prospect is going through on a day-to-day basis, there's going to be a higher success rate that comes along with that, inevitably, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a matter of, and look, I agree with you. And I could think of a handful of freight tech companies that took a different route and deliberately hired people from outside of the industry that had success, and some that failed miserably as a result of that. So it's not impossible to do it, but there's definitely companies that have taken the opposite approach and it's worked out for them. So yeah, it just depends. I think the most important piece of this is like any relationship building, whether it's doing what I'm doing in recruiting, or if you're running a brokerage or what have you, the sales is about building warmth. Sales is about building warmth and trust. And the faster that you can build warmth and trust, the less it's about, I'm selling this to you. And the more it's about, I'm trying to help you get to where you want to go. And when the person selling the tech has been in the buyer's shoes, you just get to that warmth and trust a little bit faster,
No, absolutely, man. So how's how are you seeing things? I know you're saying it's been busy so far, at the beginning of this year. Do you see a lot of that kind of keeping up throughout the year? Or is this something where or is this time of year naturally slow, or is this time of year naturally busy from a job seeker's perspective and a company hiring perspective?
Yeah, historically, the first quarter is usually our busiest. But there's first quarters and there's first quarters. I mean, last year was not as strong as this year. Is the demand going to continue? I'd like to believe so. I mean, folks, a lot of our clients share with us their recruitment plans for the entire year, right? Like our intention is to hire X, Y, and Z folks, Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. Obviously that can accelerate, that can go up and down based on, how quickly their business is growing. But the general consensus is folks are pretty bullish, man. Folks are growing, and there's a lot of money that wasn't being spent the last 2 years that's kind of pent up on the VC side and the private equity side that is currently being spent. And when these companies receive money, one of the first things that they're going to do is go out and make very targeted, critical hires.
Yeah.
And so we're seeing quite a bit of that.
Do you think that, there's any, I mean, I don't even know if you can answer this but like, is there any hesitancy from venture capital and investment that maybe kind of came from these last couple of years? Like you're saying that, hey, they're ready to spend. Do you think that there's going to be that continue investment into the transportation industry, or are they going to kind of continue to sit idle here for a little bit until there's, because there's a lot to be seen, like from my perspective, Wasim, there is no market improvement out there at all. Like, I know it's easy to point to a couple of dots on a graph and say, see, look, there's been growth. But if you're out there from a business development perspective, nothing has changed. I would say the only thing that has changed from the front lines is there's a different sentiment out there from the shippers that they're like at least open. I don't know if it's because I just sound so good on the phone that they're like, hey, man, you actually sound like you know what you're talking about. But that hasn't led to a massive influx in freight that's going on out there. So is there a natural ramp up period, I guess, is what maybe I'm asking here is that like, hey, people are like, dude, let's get this stuff built because maybe 2026, that windfall is going to actually be there.
Yeah, I think at some point people have to take a bet, right? So anyone who's been in this industry long enough knows that there's ups and downs, and anywhere from 5 to 10 years, it's cyclical. Obviously, with COVID, we had a very, very fast ramp up and then a very fast decline. That was not a natural occurrence, and the market's going up and down. And so my understanding, obviously, I'm not a freight broker. I'm not selling freight services, but my understanding is that things have kind of bottomed out over the last 3 to 6 months, and so folks are betting that it's going to turn for the better. Whether or not it turns for the better in the next 2-3 months, or maybe not until Q4, folks are betting that there's only one way that it can go, and that's up. And then there are factors outside of the price of freight and the price per mile, and all these levers within transportation that make people feel good or bad about spending money, man. I mean, there's definitely, regardless what your politics are, some people felt very excited in November and felt hopeful in November. Some people didn't, but that was definitely a factor. The election was definitely a factor in how people feel about where the economy is going or where it isn't going. Whether, again, regardless what your politics are, typically a conservative government is going to be, extra business friendly and be about deregulation and so on and so forth. And so those things make people feel optimistic about, how much freight is going to flow, how much freight is going to come in and out of the country. Now we're seeing a little bit of adverse effect, right? With how people are responding to conversations around the tariffs. Some folks are really it's making people very hesitant. And some folks are thinking, hey, long-term, this is going to be really, really good for us. And they're doubling down on their investments. So, so a lot of it is based on data and that we see day in and day out. And a lot of it is based on how people feel. What is your confidence level?
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I think that one of our biggest flaws as a society in regards to business is we are so used to instant results in everything in our life. Think Uber Eats, Amazon, we can get whatever we want whenever we want, right? There's no real wait. So when people see a lot of this talk about tariffs and everything else and the reindustrialization of the United States, which I'm a fan of. I'm a massive America first, manufacturer here first. Sure. I also understand that it's not going to happen in the next 30 days, 90 days. It is literally a 20 to 25, maybe even a 30-year plan to get that back in here and over here. And I mean, I think everybody should be for that, right? I'm not saying that I want anybody to suffer, but at the end of the day, I truly feel like we should not be reliant on anybody to get any of our goods at any given moment. And I feel like it is beneficial for us long-term. I just think a lot of the people who are against it are talking in today's terms of like, we can't just turn on 100 million factory jobs in 30 days. Oh, of course we can. There's a rollout period that comes along with it. But again, we got to pay attention to this stuff. We have to have our pulse on this stuff at all times. And, that's one thing that I'm looking forward to this year, man, is I have just accepted the fact that uncertainty is the only certainty inside of business and entrepreneurship. And I'm here for it, right? Like I signed up for this. I know what I got myself into, and I'm getting prepared for that, man. But dude, I appreciate your time. How does anybody reach out to you to find out more about what you got going on? What conferences are you going to be at? How can people reach out to you there?
Sure. So, you can visit our website, munayyergroup.com. Wasim at munayyergroup.com is my email. Hit me up on LinkedIn. We're very active on LinkedIn. If you reach out, I'll get back to you right away. This year, we already did BGSA. We did Manifest. I'll definitely be at BCS. I'll be speaking at BCS Broker Carrier Summit in Indianapolis. And then most likely we'll be at TIA and at least one of the FreightWaves conferences later this year.
Perfect. That sounds great, man. Thank you so much for joining me. If you guys can't find him or his companies or anything, hit me up. I will gladly put you guys in contact with him. But that is going to be it for today, you guys. As always, if you got value in what you heard, subscribe to the show, you guys. Share it out there to your network, because if you saw value, your network's going to see value as well. I appreciate you guys. I love you guys. And we'll be talking to you soon.
Thanks, Chris.
Absolutely. We don't have any